It's now 2 minutes after 7. This is Morning Express. In case you're joining us now, welcome aboard. And I'll start, first of all, by introducing the panel that we have this morning for the newsroom. And the discussion that we're going to be having is safety of your children in schools. The question that we're asking this morning is, are you confident that your child is safe in school? Right now, as many children, I'm sure, have been dispatched to school, are you confident of their safety as they are in school? But joining us this morning to have this conversation, I'll start with my extreme left. We have Marceline Nyambala, who's the CEO for AMWIC, and AMWIC is the Association of Media Women in Kenya. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I'd already introduced the other two guests, but I'll go ahead and do that. We have Honorable Yusuf Hassan, who's a Member of Parliament for Kamkunji, and Jane Gordia, who's media trainer and practitioner. Thank you for joining us for the newsroom. And before we get into the subject, I'd also like to have Patrick Amimo basically give us a breakdown and a rundown. I also have Zinziki Biku, who's going to be keeping an eye on your reactions and what you have to say on social media. But first of all, let's cross over to one of our senior reporters, Patrick Amimo, who is at our town studio, and that's it at INM. Basically, just to give us a breakdown. Patrick, thank you for joining us this morning. Moi Girls is not an isolated case. What happened now? The entire board of management at Moi Girls basically being dissolved, but it's not an isolated case. Patrick, maybe just give us a rundown of some of the insecurity issues that we have had in the near past.
Thank you, Michael. The case of Moi Girls is gaining prominence because it's only less than 10 months ago where the school had a fire incident and we lost 11 students from that particular school. The report on the school fire was released, but then as to whether it was implemented or not, that remains to be seen, because given these now latest incident where at least 3 girls are said to have been raped on Saturday morning, then it shows it's brought apprehension. I was in the school on Saturday, and the students were in panic mode, and in fact some could not even agree to go to their hostels to spend the night there before they could leave on Sunday morning as they'd agreed. Some decided to sleep in the dormitory. But then, as looking at it, it's not the first time that we're witnessing this in schools. Some schools have in the past reported cases of insecurity. We remember in the 1990s there was a school in St. Kizito where girls were also raped. That particular incident, the government came in to investigate, and also such instances on really what happened, and a report was released. We've had cases in the past where students, especially during the second term, we see cases of insecurity and school unrest rising. It was very, very rampant in the 90s and early 2000s, but the cases have gone down. Some of these cases were said to have been probably caused by the tension that accompanies that mock examinations. It's something that was addressed. We've had also commissions come up with reports on how they can deal with insecurity, but it appears it's something that is we've yet to find a lasting solution. Last year, we saw students from Kibabii sneak into a girls' school undetected, only to be realized later that the boys had sneaked into a girls' school donning the girls' uniform. We also had similar reports at Singori Girls. So it's something that is happening in our schools, and it shows that probably we have a poorer security. Either the watchmen that are manning our schools are not very, very careful enough, and or these schools have not been adequately fenced. Like for the case of Moi Girls, I talked to some students, and they said their watchmen at times, when it gets to about 1 a.m., most of them are asleep, and they don't care whether they don't adhere to their duty. So it's something that maybe the school administration or we'll be looking at how they hire the security personnel around the school, and also probably the teachers who are on duty, because oftentimes you see that, unlike in the past where we saw students, most schools, teachers stayed in the school compound. Nowadays, teachers don't stay in the school compounds. Some of them, like in urban centers, they just stay in the estates. So they leave the students alone, either with the watchmen and or matron. So students are not adequately monitored to see whether their safety needs are adhered to or not. So those are some of the inadequacies that maybe the ministry needs to address going forward. Michael?
Thank you very much, Patrick. Basically just giving us a history of insecurity in school and more predominantly Moi girls, because that's what basically has set the stage for this conversation. Now, the entire board of management at Moi Girls School has been dissolved following a defilement incident. The school principal, Jael Mureithi, has also opted to resign amid heightened probe into Saturday's rape incident at the institution. And as Education Cabinet Secretary Amina Mohammed made the announcement, structures around the school were demolished, sparking protests from their owners. Now, Caroline B. has this report.
Last Saturday's events at the Moi Girls School in Kibra have elicited protest from, among others, parents, civil society groups and former students of the school. The rape ordeal coming less than a year after the fire tragedy of 2017 that claimed the lives of 10 students. Following the latest rape incident, the school's principal, Jael Mureithi, has tendered her resignation amidst pressure from members of the public. And she is not the only one faced with the axe. The board of management has also been dissolved.
I have today received a request for early retirement from the principal of Moi Girls School, Nairobi, Mrs. Jael Mureithi. The TSC has accepted the request.
The current board of management of Moi Girls School, Nairobi, is dissolved with immediate effect. An interim BOM comprising officials of the Ministry of Education and the Teacher Service Commission will be put in place immediately to oversee the management of the school until a substantive board is constituted.
The ministry made the announcement after it received the preliminary report, which cannot be released publicly until full investigations are complete. The Ministry of Education has declared a raft of new measures which will be effected instantly. From now on, the school will be guarded 24 hours by 5 armed police officers provided by the Interior Ministry until the probe is over and the report released.
The ministry has ordered an overhaul of the entire security system, including the replacement of all existing security agents.
All non-teaching staff comprising of cooks, cleaners, librarians and office messengers will be subjected to a fresh vetting by the Board of Management.
Following Mrs. Mureithi's early retirement, Ms. Florence Omusula, one of the school's deputies, has been appointed in an acting capacity until the Teacher Service Commission appoints a substantive principal.
In addition, the ministry has directed that all coaches and trainers involved in co-curricular activities must be registered by the Teacher Service Commission. Any private school that will break the rule will be shut down, while public schools will be dissolved at once. This comes as 6 teachers, among them a drama teacher, and 2 support staff linked to the rape claims were ordered to take a DNA test for forensic scrutiny. The ministry has also cancelled all visiting day plans and ordered a stop to co-curricular activities in 3rd term. Meanwhile, the National Disaster Management Authority embarked on demolishing all stalls lining the perimeter fence of Moi Girls School, arguing that they were hiding sports for culprits. Vendors and hawkers watched in disbelief as their property were being brought down. They complained that they were not notified of the planned demolition.
Hivyo vyote tunavitoa kwa sababu insecurity in the school cannot be compromised.
Sijapata habari lakini nimeingia tu saa hii, nimepigiwa simu nikiwa kwa barabara.
Tumeishi hapa miaka nyingi na hakuna kitendo kama hicho kishaitendeka.
The Ministry of Education has said that security cannot be guaranteed in schools due to the nature of the society, but promised to protect children in learning institutions. Parents have been directed to assemble at the school on the 7th of June to elect a new parents' association following its dissolution, while the students have been ordered to report back to school on the 10th of June before 5 p.m. Caroline B., KTN News.
All right, so that sets the stage for our discussion. And what we'd like to find out is whether, first of all, we have given the full story of school security. And I'll start with you, Marceline. On so far, we know what's happening to Moi girls. And this, of course, is because of the story that came to light after the girl was raped last Saturday, I believe it was. But this is by no means an isolated case. We've had incidences of children being defiled, basically by their teachers, sometimes their guardians, sometimes by watchmen, all sorts. Your thoughts on how we have covered this story and whether we have given the full story, and after this is said and done, are our schools going to become more secure?
Thank you, Michael. The first thing is at least this incident was highlighted. And because it was highlighted, we have seen that there is an impact. The immediate impact, we can see what the Cabinet Secretary for Education has done. However, the challenge of us as the media, what we do, after we highlight it, we will focus on it during this period. But after some time, yes, after some time, the story dies, a new story emerges, and our focus shifts. And then we have very little follow-up. And I'd like to say that this incident, I don't want to say thankfully, but because this is a prominent school, at least a lot of attention has been given to it. And also, like Amimo said, given that another incident of fire had already occurred earlier, then it gives it a lot of prominence. But we find that there are many other incidents nationally that happen that hardly get highlighted because perhaps the school is far away, it is not in Nairobi, and even the students may not have access to the media like the girls did. They took the initiative that this story must reach the media, and at least it caught the national attention, and the pressure from various groups has forced the administration to take action. But going forward, we want to see what will be the impact overall in terms of policy. And sometimes you find that some time ago, we had pages that were focusing on education. There was an opportunity for follow-up. But when we don't have editorial guidance and opportunities and spaces where we consistently follow up on education stories, some of these stories may fall off. There are many incidents, I think I've just read in the newspaper today, that over, I think, 160-something incidents of defilement in schools, which I think, and the Teacher Service Commission is admitting that there could be more. And there are various levels of insecurity. There is defilement, there is even children fighting amongst themselves, there is fire. You'd find that you still find schools where students are in a dormitory and the door is locked from outside. And in case of anything, the students may have to wait for the teacher, and perhaps the teacher is not so near. So you find this, how often do we have follow-up? And what I would like to see is what kind of policy guidelines may emerge. And if you look at this story, you'd find that at the initial stage, there were a lot of inconsistencies. And perhaps this is due to the flow of information from the school. Could the ministry also give a guide on who would be the spokesperson and even guide the schools? And so they would need some kind of PR and media communication skills.
Needs to be there. All right, allow me to bring in Honorable Hassan, and a good starting point, well, not good because the incident, of course, is one that many regret, or we all regret, but where should this story go from here? Because it's all good. I've just listened to that story there, and there's going to be 5 police officers who are going to be guarding the school while this is going on. But soon, it may not be a big story because other things may happen. And as the media, of course, we follow the big story. But what should be the impact of this particular story, specifically from us as the media, to ensure that our children are safe? And not just Moi Girls because it's in Nairobi and it's prominent, but there's that school in, the village where possibly there could be a lot of defilement taking place but has not been highlighted.
I think we really need to look at how our schools are run and whether they are run according to the best practices. Because from what I hear, these schools are run like kind of in the Stone Age, very rigid, very inhumane. There is no, I want to know what management and control systems are in place. What are the procedures in dealing with issues? Because I think what we see in Moi Girls is a deeper problem than just sexually, SGB, sexually based gender. gender-based violence. And in some ways, it shows that there is a serious problem of management in the school. For example, one of the items quoted by the media was the fact that nobody knew that, in fact, a rape had taken place until 6 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
So what mechanism, what system is in place to make sure that if an incident happens, who is responsible? For example, the matron, is there a matron on duty? What happened to her between 2 o'clock and 6 a.m.? There's a bit of a gap in that story, and therefore I think we need to, beyond blaming the principal, of course, she bears a responsibility, the teachers bear responsibility, the board bears some responsibility, but what is in place to ensure that it is a system, it's a living system that is tested and tried. For example, when you have fire, or to prepare for fire or a disaster, you have a drill. Is there a drill? Who supervises the security guards and make sure that they do their job? Because as we know, they're all human beings,
right.
And if they have an opportunity, lack of supervision, lack of professionalism, lack of discipline, they will of course not do their job. So there is a total failure in the system that needs to be addressed. Just replacing personnel and blaming what has happened on individuals is not going to resolve this issue. Another school is going to have that problem, and more stories of this kind would come out unless we're able to address this problem holistically and put into place good management practices.
Okay. Jane, from a media perspective, we have the story, and the story is that the girl was raped. There's also those major gaps between the time she was raped and when the story actually got to an authority. There's a lapse, which obviously means evidence would have been tampered with and possibly destroyed even. But where do we take this story from here? Because it is, like I said, a starting point, but should not be the end, and should also create impact to a point where our schools become a safer environment for the children.
It's unfortunate. I'm an alumni of Moi Nairobi Girls. I went to Moi Nairobi Girls when there was no wall fence. It was just some barbed wire. And nothing happened during that time. We were all safe. We had two matrons, Mrs. Gadere and Mrs. Dambuki, who would do rounds in the night in the hostels. Yeah, throughout even that 2 a.m., Mrs. Gadere, Mrs. Nabuki would be walking around and checking on girls, just to ensure that they are safe. Maybe even things like girls sharing beds, it was not allowed, you know. They would just go around checking.
And to enforce discipline as well.
And to enforce discipline as well. So like, if for this case we are told the matron's door was knocked from 2 to 6 and she never woke up, that means that person is not even supposed to be a matron. She's in the wrong place. So my question is, because other than talking about the sexual assault that happened, what do we tell our children? How can they protect themselves in school and out of school? Because sexual assault is a big problem in this country. And when a girl is even sexually harassed by a teacher, you know, it starts with sexual innuendos, some comments and things like that. What is this girl supposed to do?
Is that the system that Mheshimiwa was talking about? There should be a chain of command. Should, for instance, a teacher make a suggestive move towards a girl, where does she go?
Yes, we need to have sexual harassment policies in schools. This should be worked on with TSC, the Ministry of Education, and the schools themselves. Then the issue of security. Is security in schools a school management issue or a government issue? Because these are public schools. Who is supposed to be in charge of the security that is placed in schools? We are now being told there are 5 policemen who have been placed in Moi Nairobi Girls, and within a short time they will be removed. What happens after that? You know, because the policemen are not going to be there throughout. So who should actually take charge of security in schools? And what are the girls supposed to do when they feel that something is wrong? Because I'm even shocked that I'm being told the bathrooms, I don't know, are outside or somewhere. I'm yet to understand, because when I was in Moi Nairobi Girls, we had bathrooms within the hostels where we were sleeping, and no girl would go outside the hostel where she's sleeping to use the washrooms. So what could have happened in this case? Why are washrooms outside? Why do, and girls would need to use the washrooms maybe when they are having their monthly periods or something, they are going to use, they will need to go out to the toilet. So why do they have to go out of where they are sleeping? It's just like even in our houses, when you have to use a toilet that is outside, definitely something could happen to you.
It's a security lapse.
It's a security lapse. So we need to know who, then it's not just about changing, like Mheshimiwa said, changing personnel. It is really for us to understand. Moi Nairobi Girls is prominent, but what about the school in my village in Siaya? What about the school in your village? Who speaks for them? Most of these girls, usually such incidents happen to them. I'll give you an example. I went to Muhoroni, and a girl, a primary school girl, less than 12 years old. We were talking about sexual and gender-based violence, and she said, after our program, she said, they were asked, do you have anything to say? Then they all said they wanted to talk to me. I'm not a teacher. Then the girl told me, you know, I was raped 3 days ago. I've not told my mother. I've not told my teachers. Unfortunately, when I told the teacher now spread it out. The girl called me and said, you know that story I told you? Everybody's talking about it.
Allow me to pause you right there, because I want to bring in Patrick Amimo, our reporter who's at INM Studio. And Patrick, quite a number of things being brought out here. Now, from your experience as you cover some of these stories, systems, do we have systems in place where students can report? What was the reason, possibly, that there was a lapse between the time the girl was raped and the time that the information got to the authorities? And how do we take that story further so that it does not stop at being a story, but policy is put in place and these systems are actually realized? Patrick.
Yes, just getting to Moi Girls Nairobi, there was that sense of apprehension. And that's why I did indicate that even the students were not willing to go back to their dormitories. They were scared at that particular night. And some wanted, because the parents were around, they wanted to stay with their parents to be assured of safety. Despite the fact that we had, they were told that the police will be in the school to ensure that night they'll be safe. Most girls were not really taking that particular idea as a comfort measure for them to go back to their dormitories. So what happens with this particular school is that the students said that there was an attempt by the administration to keep this matter off the public domain before it came to the public domain, and media came to the school and exposed it. That's when most parents now started streaming into the school. But according to the students, the school administration wanted to keep this matter under lock and key so that it's not known. Maybe because of the fact that 10 months ago, the school had witnessed a fire where 11 students died. But if this is the position then that the school administration had taken, I think it's not a right way to go, because I'm also told from interviews, some students alleged that teachers were forcing those girls who had been allegedly raped to bath. And if then you clean yourself, it means that you are erasing that evidence. It will be very difficult for those taking the DNA samples to come to the conclusion whether you are defiled or not. So those are some of the things that are happening at the school. And maybe looking at it, even from the parents' point of view, I thought it appears that school, the management maybe was also tough on parents, and maybe they could not access the school to know what was happening in the school, because it appears from my initial impression is that it appears when the parents take their kids to the school, the last point is that administration block with once you pay the fee with the bursar, then that is the end of you with your kid, and you are told go away. Maybe you'll come to take your child during the midterm and or when the schools close. And the other interesting part was that there is an isolated dormitory in that school where I found that only those Form 1 children are allowed to go sleep in that dormitory. It's isolated. It's near a fence. That perimeter wall, the perimeter fence is not well secured. And these are kids, almost maybe 13 to 14-year-olds, staying in a dormitory that is isolated about 400 meters from the school administration. If someone were to decide to get into the school and maybe defile these kids, they will have nowhere to run to, because they are Form 1s, they are very, very tiny. I don't understand why maybe these police, why they could not mix students between, they say, Form 1s to Form 4s staying in a dormitory, unlike these very, very small children staying in an isolated dormitory, fine, and near an insecure place. And also maybe the other idea is to look at the security men, the watchmen. These people need to be vetted so that there are people who really understand that they are taking care of children, and not probably when maybe the school administration thinks that the watchmen are performing their duty, you find them either they are asleep or attending to other cause. So there's a lapse in the schools, and we need to also go, not that we lack reports, like when the rape incident happened in St. Kizito in 1991, where 71 girls were raped. There was a report on how to deal with that happened and how to deal with it. That report is gaining dust in the ministry headquarters. What happened about it? When we had the Changuli school fire, there were recommendations from the ministry on what should be done in such cases where maybe students are used to perpetrate violence among their fellow students. These reports remain unimplemented, and that's maybe the weakest point. We need to go back to these reports and see what the policymakers did indicate at that particular time. We've seen the Education Committee come up with a report as they say we need to install CCTVs. But not all schools might have an advantage to have CCTVs installed, because some in the rural areas maybe are even grappling with how to set up a laboratory. So these are some of the things that we need to look at and see how we can secure our schools to be safe environments for students, both girls and boys. Michael.
Thank you very much, and I'll start with you, Mheshimiwa. Quite a number of gaps that we can see here. But now, from a policy level, do you feel that this is a story that should drive us as a country to ensure that now we secure our schools, and not just by suggesting things that should be done, but by actually putting them? For instance, we have now the 5 policemen, if we can use that as an example, who have been put at Moi Girls. But what about the other schools?
Well, I think that is a temporary measure, as has been mentioned. It can only be something to be done until a proper and more sustainable practice is put into place. Mm-hmm. And you can't put 5 policemen in every school in Kenya. What we need is to have a clear system in place, to have the rules and regulations in place, and to ensure that there is a leadership in that school that is well familiar with those rules and regulations and can implement that system once they take over. So I expect the new principal and the new board would be able to put into place the measures that would make sure that, in fact, the school functions at every level, not only on the security level. And not every school would have a fence. And not every school not all the schools would fit the same size. For example, Moi Girls is in a very densely populated area with a lot of problems. And I don't think actually it is right for the city authorities or whoever did to rush smashing up people's property, creating another contingent or another group of unemployed people who have invested to do business now are put out of business. But in conclusion, I would say that, in fact, it is up to the ministry and to the schools to take this matter very seriously and to put into place a system and rules and regulations that can make sure that we do not repeat the same problem. And as has been mentioned by your reporter, in fact, there are serious incidents in the past that have forced the schools and the government to come up with answers. What has happened to those reports? Are they available? Is it possible for the ministry to roll them out and to make sure that this goes to every school in the country, to make sure that, in fact, we can cope with these problems when they happen? Accidents do happen, like fire would happen, floods would happen. There would be indisciplined kids who might cause problems. But I feel that the school's leadership in Kenya, the leadership of our schools, seems to have lost the game somewhere, because there seems to be a lot of problems in our schools that could be controlled with good leadership, with good rules and regulations and measures.
Okay. Marceline, looking at or taking away the focus from Moi Girls, we have other schools, especially in rural areas, that probably have similar or even worse incidences of either insecurity. Would this be an opportunity for us to take pen and paper and literally now go searching for those schools, so that this is not just something that will be a knee-jerk reaction and will not affect just the schools in urban areas, but will generally affect the way schools are run?
Yes, certainly. This is at the tip of the iceberg, because you will find that the way our population is growing, almost at 3%, about 1 million per year, you'll find that the infrastructure of schools that is available, I could see the ministry saying, please add more beds. We are not even sure that how the children are sleeping, whether they are comfortable. And I think for parents and everybody and every other Kenyan, we want to entrust the ministry. It is the ministry who have the opportunity to go to the schools and inspect. Like Amimo said, when you go to Moi Girls, as a parent or anybody or as media, you'll only be able to enter the school to a certain limit. But the ministry has an opportunity to go and inspect the schools. I also wanted to talk about the issue about continuous training, whether it is for the teachers or for the head teachers. You could see that the teachers are saying, can you clean up yourself? You know, and this, in terms of...
evidence.
Yeah. So you want to ask yourself, is it out of ignorance or is it deliberate? So I want to assume that it is out of ignorance. And therefore, the teachers need to be trained that when there is a case of rape, defilement, evidence and speed within 72 hours, and the earlier the better in terms of picking up evidence. And so I feel the teachers and the head teachers need an opportunity to constantly be allowed to learn what are the policies, what are the guidelines, how do you deal with certain issues, whether it is first aid or fire, or in many other respects. Finally, I want to talk about the even psychosocial. We are only seeing physical effects, but what about the teachers and people in the schools who abuse children? We can see the fires, we can see the physical abuse, but there could be other issues, bullying and other forms of things that are not tangible that children suffer in school that also scar them, that also need to be, people highlighted. Need to be aware and highlighted, yes.
All right, Jane, we are running out of time, so maybe I'll need your closing comments on where you'd want to see our schools possibly in the near future, this being a springboard that has brought this to the foreline. But just like Marceline has mentioned, this is what we are seeing. It's almost like the fruit, but there is also a lot that's happening. There are those who are probably molested and never say anything. There are those who possibly have been bullied but never have said anything. So where would you want to see this as you include your wrapping thoughts?
I would like to see a situation where we speak out. We break the silence on sexual and gender-based violence. We have tended to normalize rape and defilement. I want to see a society where when rape or defilement happens, we report. That is what we are doing with schools. And we say, if you are touched, if you are raped, if anything happens to you, even in the workplace, like the hashtag #MeToo, speak about it, report to somebody. If it is your father who has done it, report to your teacher. If it is your teacher who has done it, report to your father or report to the police. Teachers should not normalize sexual assault within their spaces. They should be the first protectors of children, because when children are in boarding schools, it is the teachers and the school management who are in charge of them. So if this management cannot protect these girls, if this management cannot ensure that these girls receive like the 72-hour period within which a sexual a rape or defilement case is supposed to be managed, with things like getting the
samples and evidence,
yeah,
and also
HIV and all that, and even pregnancy. if you want to hush it, how are you helping this girl?
Okay.
Rape is traumatizing. Defilement is traumatizing. These girls, you can't wash it away. Even if you tell somebody to bath 1,000 times, it will live with them for the rest of their lives. So we need to find a way of dealing with it, but first it means we must talk about it.
All right, I want to get wrapping thoughts from you, Mheshimiwa and Marceline, but first of all, let me just get our closing comments from our reporter, Patrick Amimo, who is at our INM studio. Patrick, as you wind up, your wrapping thoughts on this.
I think the students need to be given those life protecting skills. They need to know how to react whenever there's an attack in the school. And two, also that we need to see a situation where, apart from the prefects and teachers in the schools, we need to have a situation where we have like counselors. I remember like the school I schooled in, that's Kakamega High School. We had prefects, we had the people whom we refer to as counselors. These are people who intervened between the prefects and teachers whenever there are any excesses here, and students could feel comfortable to report such excesses if it's cases of bullying and or not to these counselors, and that we could see the matter could be handled well. But a situation where we only have prefects and maybe teachers, they can gang up against students and so muzzle them from speaking out. And maybe that could have been the case of Moi Girls, because the students felt helpless given after this particular incident. So if we had like another layer probably of these counselors, students who can come in and be emboldened and be empowered to speak out on behalf of the students, then I think we can have see some better management in our schools, and like it being that it's the prefect and teachers, because they can collude at times. Michael.
Thank you very much, Patrick Amimo, our reporter. We're going to release him at this point as we get wrapping thoughts from, let me start with you, Marceline, your wrapping thoughts and your closing comments.
For me, let's have a concerted follow-up of the incidents as media and even the people in the Ministry of Education. Let the story, let's revisit even the fires. Let's follow up this story until we see what is the impact. That the impact is not only to Moi Girls. Let the impact spread out to other schools.
Have a ripple effect to other schools. Mheshimiwa, your closing thoughts very briefly.
Well, I think it is important to have a total review of the state of our schools, because I think there is something rotten. And there's an opportunity now for the ministry, for the Teacher Service Commission, for the unions, teachers' unions, as well as the parents, to get together and make sure that, in fact, we learn from the lessons of Moi Girls and other places, to put into place management and control systems, to introduce gender-sensitive training for both the teachers and for the particularly girls' schools, the younger ones, and to make sure that, in fact, we do not repeat this particular problem. I think it is important to have every school to have a manual which outlines what steps, what management and control systems every school leadership and teachers should take. And this should be very, very, very clear and spelled out, so that there is no doubt who is in charge of what, where. And I think unless we're able to do that, we would be able to have this problem tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. For the media, I think it is important for the media not only to assign crime reporters to cases like this, but perhaps to have a dedicated education bit where an education specialist, a reporter specialized in education, can report at what is happening in our schools, because it's not just enough to be reporting about the crime that has taken place and then forgetting the story. The amnesia that we suffer in Kenya is that even with corruption, even problems of unity and reconciliation, there is usually no follow-up. We just move from one story to the other, as has been said, and we forget it. I think there should be an education bit where that would be followed, what has happened, what steps have been taken, what corrective action have been put into place and have been implemented.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll have to wind it up right there. That's Honorable Yusuf Hassan, a Member of Parliament for Kamkunji, Marceline Nyambala, who's the CEO for Amwik, and last but not least, Jane Gaudier, who's a media practitioner and trainer. That's the newsroom. It's now 19 minutes to 8. This is Morning Express. We're going to take a short break, but we still have more lined up for you. Do stay with us right here on Morning Express.